Hello and welcome to another episode of Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. Microsoft Mentors is designed to lift the lid on the career journeys of the most successful leaders in the Microsoft ecosystem and to share their knowledge, insights, experience and expertise with the wider Microsoft community, offering mentorship at scale. Each week I'll be having open and honest conversations with technology leaders, business owners and technical experts from across the world of Microsoft tech and unpicking their past routes to success, their current models for personal and professional growth and advising you on how to develop the next steps of your cloud career. Stay tuned every week, every Wednesday at midday on LinkedIn Live and wherever you listen to your podcasts. Let's grow together. Well, Ed, thanks very much for joining me on Microsoft Mentors, the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So, Ed, we obviously had a little bit of a pre-call. It sounds like you've got quite a busy life, 4 kids,
Yes.
a fairly new role. So life's probably pretty hectic for you most of the time, is it?
Really hectic. I'm just grateful that my wife is very good at scheduling. That's all I'll say. Because I am a complete mess when it comes to home life and organising things. I'm much better at work, I must admit. And she's going, why can't you bring what you do at work into home life? But yeah, it is pretty hectic.
Yeah, it's really funny you say that, Ed. I am exactly the same. I think just naturally I'm probably quite disorganized. I must be. So at work, I have lots of processes, lots of systems, lots of plays in my working life to make sure that everything is super organized. Go out into the real world in my own life, and like I say, my wife hates me because I'm just so chaotic in that side of my life.
Yeah, I hear you. I feel the pain. I'm definitely one of those guys. But we have to try, right? But it kind of can be very difficult when you have to be on during the day, super organized, and trying to corral people and organize projects and programs, and looking after big teams. When you get home, you just want to shut that part of your brain down a little bit. So that's when it all kind of goes to chaos.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of the listeners that don't know you, Ed, be good just to get a bit of a feel. What's your current role? Where do you work at the moment? What's that all look like?
So I am the Cloud Practice Director at Sopra Steria. I've been in the role for 11 weeks roughly, so fairly new to the role. If you don't know Sopra Steria, and you'll be forgiven if you don't, we are a large European tech company with a big presence in the UK, but we fly very much under the radar from a Microsoft and cloud perspective, even though we do lots of great stuff across highly regulated industries. And I think my role in joining Sopra Steria will be to elevate our position in the market, bring our capability together under one roof. We've got lots of capability around the organization, around cloud. So organizing that into a practice structure which will give our strategic partners, an easy way to engage with us, and obviously for us then to tell the market what we do and what's our go-to-market proposition.
Sounds like a good task ahead of you then. So lots of capability there and just building it out into a bit more of a formal practice structure then by the sounds of it.
Absolutely.
How is Sopra positioned when it comes to their sort of Microsoft partner statuses, designations and things like that? How does that all look at the moment?
Yeah, we've got, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, I should probably, but we've got 13 Azure designations and specializations, and we've got more across Dynamics 365 and M365, and we're accredited all the way up to MSP expert status. So yeah, there's lots of work gone into that in terms of our capability, our delivery, as I said, what we do for clients. But again, there's probably not a lot of information out there which says we have all those great designations and certifications, and that's kind of part of my role in terms of surfacing that back up into Microsoft and indeed into AWS as well, even though we can't mention that on this call. But,
Yeah,
we
that's the
do.
dark side on this podcast.
That's the dark side. But yeah, we do have, and this is what really attracted me to the organization. It really has a great foundation in cloud. And it's one of those organizations that you probably don't know exists, if that makes sense. We
Yeah.
employ 55,000 people across Europe and India and Canada. We turn over 5 billion euros. So we are quite a sizable organization. It's just one of those organizations you probably wouldn't have come across too much, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm always interested to hear what that initial transition into a new organization is like for people, because obviously, we all know when people move jobs, we've all done it in our careers, there's lots of change going on. So what's that sort of first 11 weeks look like for you in terms of getting bedded in and understanding the organization and the culture and everything?
Yeah, it can be quite, obviously, coming from KPMG, a big four, especially from a cultural point of view, the change can be quite different. And I think the first few weeks have definitely been spent understanding what that capability is that we do possess. What is it that what is it about us that governments and defense companies trust us to run a lot of their business processes and infrastructure and systems, and really getting to the bottom about why we are good at what we do. Like I said, you don't hear a lot about us in the news, even though we do handle quite a lot of critical infrastructure, not just in the UK, for other major organizations across Europe. So really understanding that from an organization point of view, and then really getting to grips with the culture. I suppose a lot of listeners would work for companies who have we look after our people first type mentality, but to actually come into an organization and see it actually in practice around how they look after their people is they practice what they preach. And I think that's very evident in terms of the welcome that I've received coming into the organization, how receptive people are to help, and the enthusiasm around our Microsoft partnership and how we're going to elevate that to the next level to grow our business and work towards that practice structure. And it's not just Microsoft, it's across a few other strategic alliances, and really getting to grips with, okay, how do we translate all that good stuff that we are doing into that Microsoft story? So I think from a cultural point of view, it's been a really positive experience joining the organization.
Yeah. No, sounds like a good journey. And like that, that first few months in organisation is make or break a lot of the time, isn't it? You want to feel like you're bedding in and have got the support and ability to come in and sort of work within the remit that you've been brought in by the business to do. So it's good that you're feeling that straight away. And then, so that's sort of where you're at now, and we'll probably dive back into that in a bit more detail a little bit later. But I guess if we wind the clock back a few years, and have a look at sort of your route to where you've got to now, and what sort of the different components are of that journey. So I guess even pre-career, pre-working, was tech a hobby of yours? Was it a passion of yours? Is that how it translated into eventually being in your career path?
Not really. I mean, I think consoles was probably the most tech I dealt with.
Yeah.
Nintendo and Mario Brothers and that kind of thing. I think from an aspirational point of view, look, I wanted to be a footballer. Who didn't, right? A professional footballer. And then outside of that, I was always interested in physics and science.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, I didn't really get the grades that I wanted to go into university at physics level. So I kind of reset my thinking, and I was always that kind of technical anyway. I didn't really know what kind of field you could go into in IT. So I took a bit of a punt and went to university to do electronics.
Yeah.
So circuit boards, voltage, all that kind of real deep electronics, technical building. It was probably a little bit beyond what I wanted to do in terms of technology. And I did that for a year and a half. And I was kind of getting a little bit bored with it, a little bit frustrated with it. And I decided, look, I'm going to take a step back from university. I'm just going to go out into the job market and get a job to earn some money because, I was young. I wanted to go out with my mates and, I was more
Yeah.
interested in that kind of thing. So I scoured the ads in the paper. Back then it was all newspaper ads rather than everything's
Yeah.
online today. That's how long ago it was. It makes me sound really, really old. But I saw an advert for a junior computer technician for a small computer company in Dublin. I went in, had a chat with them, did the interview, got offered the role, and it was basically just building PCs and servers for universities and banks at the time. And we would import, I don't know if you remember LNX, they're a UK PC manufacturer. If you remember, they used to sponsor Wimbledon Football Club. We used to import
Yeah.
all the components from them, and we used to build all the hardware and install operating systems, which was Windows 3.11 and NT4 eventually. So
Yeah.
that's where I really started, and I think you know that modular building block approach really got me interested in IT in terms of, okay, I had a bit of a grounding in electronics, so I knew how the motherboards worked and the processors and all that kind of hardware, but actually building something and seeing it going out the door to a customer to actually improve their business operations really kind of got me really interested in IT. It wasn't necessarily tech, it was the benefits that I brought to people in their working day, and it was something really simple as it, sending PCs out with Excel on them, so the financial services companies could automate some processes. So it was that kind of initial journey that got me interested in IT.
Yeah. And it sounds like then, so even from that very first role that you picked out of the paper, um, the blend of building technology solutions for businesses and having Microsoft tech within that, whether that is on the software side with Excel or whether that's on the operating system side with Windows 3 or NT, it looks like that combination of working to build tech for businesses with Microsoft technologies was there right from the outset for you then.
It was definitely was, and we were under a lot of pressure at the time. We were a small company. You had um, big manufacturers entering the market like Dell, who were
Yeah.
large scale factory. So we had to come up with a lot of ways to make our production line quicker. There was only two of us in the production line, believe it or not, building PCs and servers, and then we'd hand it off to a service department. But it was really then we started looking at automation, believe it or not, in terms of how do we automate the operating system build quicker? How do we get more hard drives built so we can install them into the machines? And we'd have banks and banks of hard disks with cloning machines going and building the machines, and that obviously threw up a lot of issues with Windows in terms of its naming convention and all that kind of SID naming and conflicts and all that kind of stuff. So it was a real steep learning curve in terms of, okay, we're trying to get all this stuff out the door to our clients because they're under pressure for their business to improve their processes, but actually we're under pressure as well to improve our processes because we've got big manufacturers entering the market who can do this at scale and we can't. So yeah, it was all about that improvement and how can we do things a lot quicker.
Yeah. Yeah. And then from that sort of initial route into tech, then what did the sort of the next few career moves look like for you? What sort of organisations and roles were you working in over the next sort of 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think I stayed in that company for 2 years, and at the time the Irish economy was growing rapidly. The Celtic Tiger it became known as, and
Yeah.
really it paid to move in your career. So I got a big pay rise and I moved to a company, a telecoms company, a mobile phone company, and that's where I spent probably 7 years, the next 7 years in that industry in telecoms, and I moved into um, uh, what became O2 and Telefonica. So I moved into a company that
Yeah.
became that. So I ended up doing a lot around data center work, large data centers, large infrastructures, large Microsoft estates. And again, it was all about how do we deploy equipment quicker? How do we deploy operating systems and applications quicker? And we're all about automation today in terms of infrastructure as code, and but even back then we were looking at scripts to pull information from Windows systems to give us quick information around memory and CPU and disk space, and keeping the lights running. So it was always very much about how can we improve about that Microsoft estate that we were building on. And I think, to be fair, the Microsoft estate was probably less reliable than its competing operating systems. The larger mainframe systems tend to run on Unix in those days, and Oracle systems, and we were always competing with those guys to get the next large application. So we always had to make sure that we had our systems robust and reliant and high availability. So that was kind of a large chunk of my career spent in learning how to build out data centers, which was really great fun. Spending the early hours of the morning going in and cabling out a data center and racking servers, and it was just a good time to be in IT, because the social element as well, to be 3 or 4 guys on site, you get food in, and I think probably a lot of new entrants into the marketplace moving into cloud will probably never have that opportunity, which is a bit sad, really.
No.
So
different landscape on in that respect, isn't it? And with those sort of data center environments that you were building, were you building those internally at Telefonica to host customer solutions? Were you going on site to build the actual customer data center? What did that look like?
It was to host customer facing solutions, and also our internal systems. So we would run the corporate side of the Microsoft infrastructure. So Exchange 5.5, God, that sounds really old, but Exchange 5.5, and we try and play around with some tooling to do automation like SMS, which became System Center, and some of the Microsoft tools didn't really work that well for us. And I think they were very slow to bring out updates for some of the products, and we kind of had to write our own stuff, so using VB script and batch shell and that kind of stuff to kind of complement what Microsoft were doing. So it took a lot of time and effort, but yeah, definitely building out customer solutions. So I don't know if you remember, you could do kind of ATM top-ups. So you could top up your mobile phone through an ATM. We used to run all those systems on the back end that would run all that. So it was quite interesting work for sure.
Yeah. And obviously that was sort of the first big chunk of your career, still based at home in Ireland, and then you moved over to England. So, was there any sort of particular drivers there to come over to this side of the UK, or?
Well, it was economic driven as well as family driven. My wife was English and she wanted to move back to the UK, and to be fair, I always thought moving to the UK was a good idea. I think, especially for my kids, it's a bigger economy. There's a lot more opportunity. So that kind of appealed. But the Celtic Tiger that I mentioned earlier, that came to an abrupt halt when the Lehman Brothers Bank collapsed and the whole global economy went downhill. So Ireland was very much impacted, and you could see things going a bit south. So it was a good time for us to kind of sell up and move to the UK. And it was very challenging, because you're moving to an economy which isn't doing so well either, and jobs and roles weren't easy to come by. So it was a very difficult transition. You talk about transition into new organization, but actually the transition from even culturally wasn't something I was expecting, to be fair. The working culture was a little bit different, and I joined a company down the south coast, small little IT company, and being used to building large data centers for, I mentioned Telefonica, and I did some for online gaming, going into then looking after, servers and cupboards, and was a bit of a culture shock, shall we say. But it grounded me a little bit as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because there's definitely lots of similarities in terms of the technology side of things and what you can implement on an enterprise versus SMB, SMC level, but the actual business challenges that they're trying to solve are so different. Like you say, for a Telefonica, it's this massive system that's global and it's integrating into ATMs for mobile top-ups, etc. And then you've got an SMB lawyer, for example, who, like say, has got maybe some small business service in a cupboard, and they just need that upgrading and maintaining and monitoring. So it's very different business challenges that you're trying to solve at that sort of level, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and it can be harder to get organizations at that level to see the benefits of investing in technology. They want to focus on their core business, and that's absolutely right. And that's why a lot of small organizations would probably turn to a small IT provider to take some of those headaches away. But beyond installing some basic applications and systems, there's not a lot really there for you to kind of improve upon too much, because maybe they don't have that investment, or they're just not that interested, to be frank.
Yeah.
But I think that's where it all changed then, when Microsoft started to play in the cloud space.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was a bit of a game changer for me. I mentioned or hinted at a little bit of frustration around some of the products that Microsoft were releasing in the noughties, and the products probably weren't as finished as they probably could have been when they were released, and the update cycle. I was actually contemplating quitting IT, because I was getting a bit fed up with having to fix things at 2 o'clock in the morning at that stage, because it kept falling over. But I think when Microsoft released BPOS, which was the early flavor of M365, really a light bulb moment came on in terms of, okay, they're looking to kind of build a product set to manage all that back-end infrastructure for clients and make it a lot easier, where you're turning it more into easy building blocks for clients, and then you're really focusing on what's the value in terms of technology. How are you going to give the client better outcomes? How are you going to allow them to focus on their core business and take the headache away? So I think that was a bit of a turning point in my career, definitely.
Yeah, and like you just mentioned there, that shift towards early days of cloud M365, which where a lot of organisations start their Microsoft cloud journey. It's a shift in the conversation, isn't it? In terms of, from you as an IT service provider, it's less about having to talk to them about a big project or moving all their infrastructure across into a different hosted data center. It's actually a much easier conversation where you can give value to the business owner quicker.
Yeah, 100%. And from there, in terms of, I worked for a couple of small boutiques down the south coast, and then I got an opportunity actually to create a startup business from the company I first worked for in my career in the UK.
Yeah,
they had developed a mobile application platform, because if you remember, around 2011, 2012, mobile applications was the big thing.
Yeah, that's when it all started to kick off, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. So it was a mobile application company, but we developed a platform that sat inside M365 and SharePoint Online, and it was basically a low code, no code mobile app platform, where a user could come in and drag and drop content onto a canvas or a page, and then we would have our system which would push out the content down to an Apple app or a Windows mobile app or an Android app, and it was a really slick piece of technology. Unfortunately, it was kind of like Power Platform before Power Platform came along.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of organizations weren't really there yet. They were still just looking at maybe migrating email into the cloud, and weren't really that far advanced to adopt something like a SharePoint with a mobile application platform inside it. So, we did a few projects for children in need. We did some projects for companies back in Ireland, but ultimately it turned out not viable, the amount of money and investment we were putting into the platform. But I think that was a pivotal point in my career from a business point of view, in terms of what I learned in terms of running a company, financials, go-to-market, marketing, making mistakes, and I made lots of mistakes in terms of that business, but that really set me up for probably the next half of my career. So if anybody's listening on this podcast, if you're young and you have an opportunity to start a business, then I would say go for it, because I think in that 12 months I learned a lot more about technology and business than probably anything that had come before it.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that you make there, because I think a lot of people when they think about what is success in running your own business is, especially in the world of social media influencers, it is, set up a business and become Stephen Bartlett. Whereas
Yeah.
actually for you, the journey in creating and growing a business, actually getting to a point where going, that's probably not quite viable. The skills that you then learnt along the way have then put you in a position to then go into the next phase of your career. And that's probably, is at the point where you start moving, obviously still heavily within the technology space, but starting to take up more leadership capacities in the roles that you're working in?
Yeah, I went when that business didn't work out. I went into, well, I kind of, I look back and say, why didn't we just pivot into just cloud work? And that was probably a mistake and a bit of a learning curve. But from there, I went into, I set up my own company, and I did contracting for the next 3 years, 3.5 years. And that's where I did a lot of my cloud migration projects. So I did a lot of work around early Azure and M365, working on large scale migrations, and that was that was more exposure into C-suite people directly
Yeah.
than probably I've had before. So then I got that kind of exposure in terms of the behaviors and how what a business wants from its technology and the outcomes driven, and I started becoming a little bit turning away from the tech in terms of not having to know everything about the tech. It was more the business angle. So I think that kind of naturally progressed me into that kind of leadership roles in terms of, okay, well, how do I change my career now in terms of going into, say, consultancy or building teams, or really going to that next level of my career. Where was I going, I suppose? And it was a very hard transition to move away from knowing everything I knew about tech and Azure and M365 and being able to do the doing, to move away from letting that go a little bit. So it was a bit of a learning curve in that respect. But I think that transition as well helped me to learn the skills I needed to take the step up into leadership roles, I think. So it was a very important period in my career.
Yeah, and I've had a similar sort of conversation with a few people on the podcast, and I think you ultimately have to, if you want to become more strategic and more vision led with customers or within an organization, you do have to walk away a little bit from being so low level with on the technical side of things and being, in the portals and writing scripts, because I think then there's a danger that you then, during the strategic conversation, get drawn back a little bit too close to the pure technology side of things, and you need to look bigger picture. What is the outcome? What's the business objective that we're trying to achieve here? And then building a technology solution that helps deliver that outcome, rather than trying to start at the technology layer first and build up, is what I've found. And then, so you mentioned that sort of then journey led you towards building and growing teams. And I guess in terms of some of the teams that you've built, grown, managed, what have they looked like in terms of the makeup of the types of people and the types of organizations that you've done that within?
Yeah, I think the first team I built was in for a small company that we did point of sale solutions for a lot of big organizations, such as Legoland and Universal and Disney, and these types of experience type organizations. And my first um, role was really to go into that organization and make it a cloud business and pull pockets of people from different parts of the organization. It was only a very, very small team, but in terms of that learning around driving more of I suppose, more of that DevOps culture, right? More of that automation,
Yeah.
more of that build and run mentality. It was very instrumental in terms of me understanding how people work and understand what interests them, how to get them motivated. And I think building a very diverse team became apparent in terms of people's perspectives and their backgrounds and where they've come from, actually gives you a lot of fuel to grow the team and make it the best it can be, if that makes sense. So in terms of, you're not just looking for you're looking for elements of people you can actually use to benefit the team. You're not going to find the perfect person for every single
Yeah.
role. It's about, okay, this is strategically what we need to do. We've got all these people in the business. How can we make these people fit and work together and gel them together? And I think having the different levels of experience and let them feel like they're part of that journey and have an input into and bring their experiences to the table. I think kind of fuels that kind of team spirit and togetherness. So I think it's very important to have a wide variety of experiences, wide variety of backgrounds in a team when you're building it out. You know, it can be very easy to go after one type of profile, one type of person, but I think you have to be able to see how people, whether they come from an extensive IT background or not, what value they can bring, what perspective they can bring. So I think that's very important.
Yeah. Yeah. Not just looking at the pure technical side of things. It's, people that have got different experiences, have worked on different projects, like you say, have maybe worked in different industries or from different backgrounds, different cultures. And probably building a team where, you don't always just want a team full of logical thinkers, or you don't want a team just full of creatives, because otherwise you end up with a very narrow field of view when you're trying to come up with solutions. You
Yes,
need the logical thinker in the room, you need the creative person in the room, you need the organized person in the room, the disorganized person like myself and yourself. So it's getting that blend of personalities, isn't it, as well as a blend of technical teams skills within a team.
exactly. And even getting the inexperienced people in the room and making them feel like they have a voice to question why, right? I'll always say, always ask why. Always ask, why are we doing something? Is this the best approach? And I think the people who have probably the most inexperience are better at that if you can bring that out of them, because they'll always challenge it, because they're trying to understand and learn, right? So they're always trying to ask that question in terms of, why do we do it this way, why not that way? And it might bring a different approach and perspective on it. So yeah, having that mix in the room is very, very important.
Yeah, and sometimes, someone with quote unquote less experience might come at a solution in a totally new way. And actually, it's like, well, why haven't we thought of that? Because we've always done it way A, B, and C. And they come in with, well, why don't we do it like X and Y? And because they've not got the preconceptions or the I guess fixed mindsets maybe from previous experiences, they can actually come in with a totally different approach.
Yeah, exactly. It's that we've always done it that way, so that's the way it always has to be. Kind of breaking down those kind of barriers. It's not necessarily just because that's the way you've done it. So, I think when I look at any organization, there's always room for improvement. There's always a process or a way of doing things that can be better. Sometimes organizational bureaucracy can get in the way, red tape can get in the way, even cultural change can get in the way. People don't like change. People like to do things the way they've always done it, right? So I always look at things and go, okay, where can we improve this? There's always something that can be improved, no matter how efficient the organization is.
Yeah, and do you think there's a common thread in terms of either like a personality type or key attributes that you see within your teams that you go, do you know what, actually that makes them an Ed O'Brien person? That's someone that I want in my team. Is there anything sort of within everyone that you tend to look for when you're growing teams?
Um, yeah, I think it's attitude. I think you know. I think you're never going to be able to know everything across every subject matter, but I think if you have the attitude to learn and have a, one or two specialisms, or something you're really good at, but actually be able to then pull other people in to ask them questions and use their expertise. I think having that drive and collaboration and working as a team, and you know working towards what you're trying to achieve as a group. I think that's really fundamental. You can have all the best technical skills in the world, but if you haven't got the drive or you haven't got the attitude, then it's never going to work for you. You can always learn new skills and learn new technical skills if you've got a good attitude, and I think that's really key. I'll always invest time in people who are you know I'll say positive. You don't have to be positive all the time. Like nobody can be positive all the time. But in terms of,
Yeah.
you're really interested in what you want to do. You know what the goal is. You're doing things the right way. You want to do the things the right way. We've got small steps to get there, and you invest time in it. So I think it all comes down to attitude. I think.
Yeah. And how have you found it? Because it sounds like quite a few of your roles as you've been going and doing that, it's been, building out a team, whether that is, bringing different people from different internal teams together, bringing people in and externally to work towards probably a new goal within those businesses. So how do you sort of manage that of maybe bringing a team together to say, we've got a North Star that we're working towards, but we've still got all of these incremental steps to get through. So how do you manage that journey of growth within the team and towards the eventual outcome?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think when you're bringing people along on that new journey, and you have to get over the hump of the um, initial request for change, right? So people know there's a change coming. They may have to come into a new team. They may need to work with new people. They may be a bit nervous or anxious about that. But I think any good team, there's always a foundation of trust. So if I'm bringing people into a team, I'm bringing them into a particular role. I'm trusting them to do that job. And I will always tell people things straight, and I expect things straight back from them. If you can delegate responsibility and ownership over the journey to these to people in the team, and get them to buy into that journey, and they feel part of it, and it's not just being done to them, then I think you can build a really, really good, strong foundation to get people on that journey and get them to really say, actually, it's not my team, it's their team. It's
Yeah.
everyone's coming together to achieve this common goal. Everyone has a role to play, whether they want to be responsible for onboarding new people, or helping writing job specs, or doing the boring mundane thing. But at least they've had an input into shaping how things are done. And we may need to tweak it and refine it as we go, but it's giving people a role in that kind of mission. Not just you know letting people sit there and pushing information to them, but actually getting them involved early in the process. I think is really, really key.
Yeah, like you say, because then you build in ownership within the team, aren't you? Eventually, and hopefully everyone within that feels like they've played a part. Whether that is being on the interviews as part of the selection technical process, whether it is helping people bed into the team. Eventually, hopefully, you build a culture where it says it in the name, but it feels like a team, rather than just a number of individuals working within a business unit.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah, you do.
you mentioned sort of slightly earlier, at the start, that's a bit of the journey that you're on at the moment with Sopra Steria. So I guess in terms of your current role and that North Star or couple of North Stars that you're working to now, what are your sort of key objectives that you're working to at Sopra over the next couple of years, do you think?
Um, I think the key objectives for us will be building our Microsoft relationship, and building our standing within our existing client base in terms of how they see Sopra Steria.
Yeah.
And you know, we want to be seen as a quality delivery partner, and we can take what we've done, as I mentioned before, in terms of the quality stuff that we are doing, and apply that to cloud. And I think there's a bit of a gap in the market at the moment, and I think we can play in that space. And we'll probably fit somewhere between maybe a big four organization and a Capgemini. We
Yeah.
want to be that quality outfit, that Microsoft jewel in the crown. We want to be their premier partner. And like I said, I think we've got the foundations to do it. We've got the leadership support to do it, and we've got really great people in the business to help do it. So the foundations are there. The recipe is there. We just need to bring it all together into a structure that helps us achieve that, shall we say?
Yeah, and will the sort of the service mix within the cloud piece be fairly sort of broad across the Azure piece in terms of infrastructure transformation, data transformation? Obviously, we're moving into the world of AI, and everyone wants to be talking about Azure Open AI services as well. So it will be a blend of with all of those Azure services. Then eventually, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my remit will cover the Azure stack for sure. Applications and infrastructure and modern workplace and business applications. We do have a separate business for data and AI because I think it's a specialism in its own right. When I think
Yeah,
of AI from my perspective and what my team will bring to the table, I think we will bring that security and governance to the table around. We'll have our AI guys, our AI practice going in and doing all the smarts around large language models and business process, but we will actually come in and make sure the foundations are in place for that organization to adopt responsible AI. Making sure we're managing their risk for them, their security toolings are up to scratch, providing that kind of bedrock for an organization to explore, to test, to play with AI in the future. So yeah, it'll be a joint thing between my business and my colleague's business.
yeah. And I think one of the dangers, and especially with the fast moving pace. I mean, cloud in itself has always been fast moving in the public cloud space. You then look at the rate of change in AI technologies, and that's even faster. And I think there's probably quite a lot of danger for conversations around AI to accelerate to a point, and that, like you say, that foundation and that bedrock isn't thought about maybe as much as it should be. And businesses have got a goal that they want to reach in terms of leveraging AI, but then in reality, when you go in and you look underneath the surface, there's a lot of work for them to do around that governance platform and security piece to be able to even get close to the goals and outcomes that they want on the AI side of things, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we don't have to look too far actually to look at that from a cloud point of view. I think over the last 4 or 5 years, the kind of early adopters into cloud probably haven't put that foundation in properly, whether it's best practice architecture, best practice security, or even best practice around how to manage that environment, because it's not like running a data center in the cloud. It's something
Yeah.
different. And I think a lot of the noise around cloud at the moment is probably around, oh, it's too expensive, or it's not right for this organization. But actually, I think a lot of organizations are finding it more expensive because they're going around that loop again in terms of having to redefine their operating model or redefining their architecture. Um, so I think we're probably in a little bit of danger that people will start jumping onto the AI bus, and they'll get so far down the road and they'll realize actually we haven't thought about all the steps we need to get there. So it's really, really important for an organization to make sure when they are developing these solutions, they do it in a safe space first, but also to bring, either partners or their internal teams on that journey with them to make sure that the foundations are rock solid, because, it'll only take one mistake from somebody in an organization to leak, sensitive data. And, you know, it's not going to be good for any organization to be in that position.
Yeah, you hopefully organisations that have or are thinking about going on that AI journey have probably learnt lessons, like you say, from their cloud journey, in terms of building out frameworks, best practices, guardrails, governance, so that as they move towards that, if they have made maybe some of those mistakes on the public cloud side of things, they're sort of aware of them as they move towards implementing more AI solutions.
It can be very difficult though, because like you said earlier, the rate of change in cloud is very fast. And if you've got internal teams who are maybe firefighting all the time and don't have the time, they're doing the more mundane tasks. They may not have had time to sit down and automate their processes, even from an infrastructure point of view.
Yeah,
They may not be able to spend that time investing in the higher value work. And I suppose that's really where, going back to where I would see AI kind of helping out, is okay, how can we use AI to deploy infrastructure? How can we use AI to actually do some of the support tasks? How can we commoditize some of those more generic work? And it's going back to what we talked about at the start in terms of, okay, what's the improvement? What's the benefit to the client? What's the outcome we're
yeah,
trying to achieve? So I think a very key area for me in the AI space is how can we bring AI into that data center space, albeit in the cloud? What can we commoditize? What can we free up our people to do better in terms of looking at future tech, how we govern it, the more higher value stuff. So that's really where I'd be interested in seeing where AI can improve things for organizations, because I still think a lot of organizations are stuck in that traditional support model, but trying to do it in the cloud, and it's not really working.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously you're not as close to the, like we said earlier, the lower level day to day tech stuff. But obviously, in your role, you still need to be abreast of all the moving pieces and what is changing in the Microsoft cloud world, cloud and AI. So how do you personally keep sort of track of changes, updates, product roadmaps? What's your sort of go-to resources or approach to keeping on top of all of that sort of stuff?
Yeah, it's generally on YouTube. I generally look at the updates from Mr. Saville.
Yeah,
His updates are quite good. I look at Azure Academy as well on YouTube, and I try and get snippets. I think time is at a premium, so the shorter the information digest, the better it is for me. And more recently, I've been using ChatGPT as well to give me a synopsis of the latest changes in cloud, which is quite good at doing, because it can just give me a quick summary, or I can do it within Copilot on Office 365. It'll give me a summary in a PowerPoint deck, and I can just read it then. So they're kind of the ways I try and keep up to date. But it is very difficult when you're not in the tech space day to day. You're not. You know, I always was a person who learned by doing. Even though
yeah,
Microsoft say this is the update and this is how it works, I always went into the portal and tried it out to see if that's what it was and that's what it did. Because sometimes the application technology out of the box from Microsoft doesn't translate very well. You have to modify it and make stuff work a little bit, maybe a little bit
yeah,
differently than Microsoft intended. So the only way you can really learn and know it is actually by doing, I think. But it can be very hard to do that when you just don't have the time to do that kind of stuff during the day. But using AI, I think, is going to be very helpful for me to keep up to date.
yeah, yeah. Use the technology that we're talking about to help yourself keep up to date with the technology that we want to be thinking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it did take a bit of time for me to trust it, in terms of, was the
Yeah,
information I was getting back correct, and even that's going to be a culture shift for organizations in terms of, okay, do I trust the data that I'm getting back from this language model? Am I going to be sending a customer a large whopping bill by mistake if this AI data isn't correct? So yeah, I think even not just the tech space, I think culturally we have a journey to go on ourselves in terms of verifying and checking that we're getting the right information back as well.
yeah. I think I've mentioned it on a previous episode, but I've almost been burnt by that myself before. And very similar. It was last year after Ignite, and I had the big Microsoft book of news, I think it's called, isn't it, after Ignite, which has got all the information in it. And I was like, that's quite a lot of reading to do. I'm just going to ask ChatGPT, what are the top 5 announcements for Azure from this year's Ignite? Gave me a list of it. I was like, perfect. I can use that in a podcast. I can use that in a LinkedIn post. Started putting it all together. And as I was doing it, I was like, I'm sure I already know about that. I'm sure I've heard of that before. And I was like, the first one raised like an amber flag, but I was like, maybe I'm just confusing it with something else. Then a bit lower down, I was like, no, I've definitely heard of that before as well. And I went back and I fact checked the 2023 Ignite updates that ChatGPT had given me, and 3 out of the 6 were from 21 and 2022. So you still need to have a bit of a feedback loop. If something doesn't quite feel right, sanity check it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's a danger, isn't it? You don't want to create a workforce where they're getting information from AI which isn't sanity checked and going in and making recommendations to a client which may not actually be the case. So there's a danger as well that people may take shortcuts with this stuff as well. So we need to be mindful of that, especially in a professional services world where it's easier for me to spin up a PowerPoint deck and say, oh, can you create me a deck on the well architected framework or something like that? And is it exactly what we want to sell? Does it have the right outcomes? Does it have our our branding and story. So, even from a professional services point of view, we need to have that governance and wrapper around AI for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So obviously you've been on your career arc that started back on Windows whatever server. Let's not mention it again. And it's taken you all the way through to now, sort of cloud computing, AI, Azure. Um, your career arc is obviously going to be very different to people that are now entering the workforce and now entering into tech, into IT. So I guess what would your be advice for someone that's maybe fairly early days in their tech career now, and how should they or how could they be approaching the growth of their career in a very different world to maybe where your career grew?
Um, I think the advice I give is, whether you want to be a programmer or go into AI or go into sales or program management, understand the fundamentals of what the technology stack does, the benefits of it. Give yourself that grounding, because when you go into your specialism area or wherever it may be, having that background enables you to talk about it a bit better, enables you to see more opportunities, allows you to look outside your own sphere of work. We want, especially with professional services, we want everyone to be able to spot an opportunity for a client, right?
Yeah.
So get that grounding and if you're a graduate, for example, get as much experience across the different disciplines. Have a play around in programming, have a play around in infrastructure, have a play around in project management, do a bit of sales. Give yourself as much knowledge across those disciplines as you can, because I think the further you go up your career, you have to become more generalist across everything. You can still have your specialism in your background, but I think the more you understand how each element of a business works, I think it'll give you a better view on how you can bring those outcomes to an organization. Understanding how it all works and how it all aligns together, I think is going to be very important.
Yeah, because I guess you've got to sort of try before you buy a little bit, haven't you? Understand actually
Yeah.
what are you passionate about and what do you enjoy doing, and also especially when you're working in larger organisations, you're going to work cross functionally with all of those different departments and teams and types of people anyway. So to have a bit of a feel in terms of how they're approaching things, having done their job maybe for, like say, just a short period of time, automatically means that you can, empathize with the fact that the project manager is really stressed out about timelines, or that the salesperson is really stressed out because you've put on a load of extra cost because of the resources. If you sort of worn their shoes for a bit of time, I think you'd probably be a more empathetic team member in the future for those types of cross-functional teams that you'd work across as well.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. I mean, I did technical project management for when I was doing contracting, and walking in their shoes. And now I have the view is, if I'm not getting an earful or I don't have, a terse conversation with a project manager, then he's not doing his job. I think that understanding of, what they're trying to achieve and get things done, and it gives you a good understanding, and it holds you well for elevating yourself up through your career. I mean, I would never call myself as a specialist. I would always call myself as a generalist. I always felt like I could turn my hands to most things. And I think having that flexibility, is going to be good for your career, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Well, now it's time for the Microsoft Mentors quick fire round, Ed.
The dreaded quick fire round.
The dreaded quickfire round. Nothing too stressful. So 10 questions. Some of them are about career tech. Some of them are just totally outside of that. Just a couple of sentence answers or one word answers if you've come up with one. So the first one, and I've asked this to a few people now, so it'd be interesting to see what your answer is. What is your favourite Microsoft product of all time?
Oh my God. Favorite product of all time. Do you know what? I'm going to be really retro. I'm going to say Windows 98 Second Edition.
Yeah.
outside of
Nice.
cloud, I think Windows 98 Second Edition was probably the most reliable product I've ever worked with.
Yeah, brilliant. And the old sort of get your CD, pop it in your computer, upload the operating system, proper old school. None of these auto updates from the cloud or anything.
No, proper old school. Yeah. So just for a bit of retro goodness. Yeah.
Cool. So you mentioned it earlier, but so if you didn't work in tech, and it sounds like you didn't or weren't going to make it as a footballer, so we can't include that one. If you didn't work in tech, what do you think you would have been doing?
I would have liked to think I would have eventually gone into physics. I mean, I went back to university when I was at work, so I could have gone into that field. So I think, probably astrophysics, I think. Something to do with space. I'm a bit of a space nerd, so I think something in that area.
Yeah. I did look at astrophysics when I was at uni as I was doing a master's in it, and then I realised that I was nowhere near close to doing it. So you've obviously hired a lot for your teams. Do you have any instant interview red flags? So if someone's interviewing and they do one thing that goes, hang on a minute, I don't like that. Have you got any of those?
I think especially during COVID times, there was a lot of people I've interviewed who would have information open on their screen, and you could actually see the pause and see them typing. And in some cases, you can see the reflection in their glasses. So yeah. Don't blag an interview. If you don't know an answer, say you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. For someone that's maybe like you and was a techie and wants to take that pivot towards leadership or management, what do you think's the best way for them to start that pivot towards leadership and management away from being a pure techie?
I would say get a mentor. Identify somebody who could actually guide and advise you in terms of what it takes to lead people and to navigate senior people in an organization. I think that's probably one thing I probably regret not doing in younger, is getting a solid mentor, which I did later on when I was at KPMG. But get yourself a mentor.
Yeah, awesome. And then outside of the working world, what's your go-to hobby activity? What do you spend your time doing when you're not chasing around the 4 kids?
You got Liverpool up there, so massive Liverpool supporter. And then anything to do with cars. I'm a bit of you can probably see the stack of Ford vehicles on my shelf. So yeah, I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to that kind of stuff. So they're my two. When I get time.
Yeah.
And obviously I look at YouTube videos around space as well. So Professor Cox and Neil deGrasse Tyson and those kind of people.
Nice. Yeah, I went to Brian Cox's live show a couple of years ago. That was hard. That was almost like a lecture. I thought it was going to be this big entertaining show, and there were very entertaining elements to it, but there were also like physics equations. I was like, not quite keeping up with you there, Brian.
I've been to it. It is hard going. It is, especially after a few drinks.
Yeah. And then final question. It's Friday night. You're not cooking. What is your go-to takeaway choice?
Oh, probably an Indian. Probably an Indian with a chicken or lamb boona and a bit of naan and poppadoms on the side.
Yeah, I'm Indian side of the takeaway debate. My wife is the Chinese side of the Indian debate, so you can imagine we're all always clashing on that on a Friday night. If we're going to have one, I want one, she wants the
other. I think the wife wins on that front. I don't mind. I can go with Chinese as well. Some favourites in there, but I think Indian just pips it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks very much for your time, Ed. It's great to talk a little bit more about your career and hopefully some interesting lessons in there for people to learn and hopefully guide their own careers based on your journey.
Well, thanks very much for having me, and hopefully some of it's useful for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, mate. I'll catch you later.
Cheers, Ollie.